Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Robert Pence for U.S. Ambassador to Finland. Welcome, sir. I appreciate it. I'm after you, so I'll turn it over to you first.
I'll be brief, relatively brief. That means I have to stick to my notes and not ad-lib. Colonel Kallinen, Colonel Heikkinen, ladies and gentlemen, members of the press, and first and foremost, all the members of the Finnish Armed Forces. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to be here today to attend the presentations for one of the two U.S. Part candidates in response to Finland's HX fighter aircraft replacement program. I'd like to convey the gratitude of my country, the United States, our gratitude to Finland for the seriousness with which you take your national security and your willingness to invest considerable resources into recapitalizing your fighter aircraft fleet. It is in the strategic interest of the United States to have a Europe which is free, whole, and at peace. Finland's strong military capabilities contribute greatly to European security. I'll interject a quote, not on my thing here, from my friend Cicero about 2,000 years ago. And it's simple and poignant. Civil liberties are meaningless if the state is not secure. That's people like you, all the men and women, and the whole civilian force in this beautiful republic that keeps your country free. And I'm sure every right-thinking Finn knows that to be true. The United States is honored to present two excellent choices to Finland. The HX program is a special opportunity to advance the already strong partnership between the United States and the Republic of Finland. As we saw with the F-18 purchase in the 1990s, for those of us here who are old enough to remember the 1990s, military sales aren't simply a transaction. They ensure continuing relationships between our militaries through training, exchanges, and dialogues. In many cases, we've seen relationships established at the tactical level continue to grow through time to the operational and strategic levels. Additionally, the HX program is an opportunity to further deepen the cooperation between the United States and Finnish defense industries. Along with this commercial cooperation comes the ability to increase our research, development, test, and evaluation efforts in areas of mutual interest. The United States and Finland have a long history of cooperation dating back, obviously, we just celebrated 100 years of foreign relations, but dating back 80 years to April 1939 when Finland requested fighter aircraft from the United States. I'm not quite old enough to remember that, but I was alive at the end of World War II. Less than 1 year later, from April of 1939, 44 Buffalo Brewster fighter planes were delivered from New York City to Finland. I note, it's not in here, do a little looking, that those aircraft ended up helping turn out more than 30 Finnish fighter aces. Acquisition times have increased slightly since then, but fortunately, so have the aircraft's capabilities. Just how far those capabilities have advanced should be clear after today, as this HX candidate strives to become the next Taiwan Helmi. So, with that, I thank you very much for welcoming me here today. I look forward to hearing the presentation and seeing these planes in the flesh. So, thank you. Thank you for having me. Good day.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you, Colonel Heikkinen, Colonel Kärnän. I appreciate your having us here, the F-35 team, for your HX challenge. It's a great opportunity for our entire team. I am Colonel David Buchanan, U.S. Air Force from the F-35 Joint Program Office in Washington, D.C. I'm the director of the international programs inside of the JPO. And before I come off this slide, I'd like to note this jet that you see on our opening slide is one of the jets that's here that made the HX challenge. So that is a nice detail that I'll say we planned carefully for. Again, we've already stepped through the welcome and introductions by our Finnish sponsors. Thank you for that. I'll do a program overview. I'll turn our capabilities overview to Major Jordan Levine, F-35 pilot, and then we'll talk to Mr. Steve Over from Lockheed Martin, and finally we'll have a Q&A session before we step outside airplane side. So getting into the program overview, I'll give a quick summary. I'll give a quick summary of what the F-35 Enterprise entails. Three variants: the F-35A, F-35B, F-35C. The A model is our conventional takeoff and landing. That's what's here for the HX challenge. That is what the Finnish Air Force is pursuing from the F-35 side of the house. The F-35B is our short takeoff, vertical landing. The U.S. Marine Corps, a couple of our international partners, and FMS customers fly the F-35B. And the F-35C is the U.S. Navy carrier variant. We're comprised of eight partners, U.S. plus 7 international partners. And as of 31 January, 5 foreign military sales customers. So we're a large 13 nation enterprise for the F-35, and the capabilities that you'll hear more about from that enterprise are designed, developed, produced, and sustained to make sure we're countering today's threats, tomorrow's threats of the future, all on economies of scale. You see that we'll have close to 4,000 jets from our known and expected customers over time, and all of the economies of scale from that will, in fact, expand this enterprise. So that's an overview of the program. Before I go on, I'll talk more specifically about our jets that are here in country. Arrived last night, 2 jets from Luke Air Force Base, Lockheed Martin test pilots. Brought them Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix, Arizona, to Langley Air Force Base in Virginia, where they spent 2 days due to our tanker support. Once the tanker support cleared and the weather cleared, we were able to get the jets off yesterday morning, make the 7.5 to 8 hour ferry, and arrive 2 Code 1 jets, meaning ready for flight operations. So that's what arrived last night. Happy to say the tankers, the jets are all in great shape. You will not see any flight operations today. That is not a function of the airplanes whatsoever. It's a function of crew rest. The pilots that ferried them over have a mandatory and well-expected, well-deserved crew rest period. So today we will not see flight operations from the F-35 team. And if there's any questions on that, I'm happy to take that during the Q&A. So that's an overview and where we are today with the jets on the ramp. This I call our F-35 by the numbers. You'll see we're just shy today of 500 aircraft delivered worldwide. 21 bases and counting. Of the 13 customers I described earlier across the enterprise, 9 of them have F-35s on their home soil. The underpinning for this large and growing enterprise are almost 1,000 pilots that we've put through pilot training. Just shy of 9,000 maintainers from all of the nations that you see represented. All of those teams have gotten us to over 250,000 flight hours on the F-35 around the globe, and the reliability and the belief in its capabilities has gotten 8 nations to declare IOC, initial operational capability, which in military service terms means a sovereign nation has decided the jets, the small or growing fleet that they have at home, are ready to be called into service. We truly are a global team, not only for the jets, the fleets around the world, but also the underlying supplier team. 1,500 suppliers around the globe, 11 plus countries, 25% of the content of every F-35 comes out of Europe, supply base in Europe. And we have 3 production facilities, final assembly and checkout, we call them. One in Fort Worth, Texas, another in Italy, Cameri, and then a third at Nagoya in Japan. So each of our 3 regions has a production facility. So stepping into how busy and complex the F-35 program has been, is today, and will continue in the future, I point out a few of our milestone events from last year. I won't talk about each of these on their own, other than to say the complexity and the broadness of our program and our program office is represented by some of these data points. I mentioned earlier IOCs, initial operational capabilities. You see a number of those from across U.S. services, partners, FMS, all last year, with more coming in the near future. You see us delivering jets to new stations, standing up new bases. You see us meeting commitments in terms of affordability, indicated by the LRIP, low rate initial production. That's our terminology for lots of jets going on contract. So I'll talk more about that in a moment. But this is a snapshot of some of the achievements, the milestone events achieved in 2019. For 2020, you see a similar array of milestone events. Not to mention the HX Challenge, which is what we're here for this week. There are plenty of others around the globe where we're doing other competitions. We did flight eval last year. We're doing this flight eval this year, and we're getting a number of ships from both U.S. ships and Queen Elizabeth class carrier for the UK. Getting all of those ready for deployments, and then still delivering on the tests, the depot, the sustainment capabilities, the quantity of jets to continue to grow our enterprise, both at home for me, and abroad. And that's but a mere sampling of what we see in 2020, and you can bet that each year after 2020 we'll have a similar array of milestones to achieve in the program. So this is a quick snapshot, switching gears to our production facility in Fort Worth. Some of you I've spoken to earlier have already been there and had an opportunity to take a tour of that. I think we could probably arrange, if there's any media interest in seeing the Fort Worth lines, we could work that through our friends at Lockheed Martin. But this is but a glimpse of the 491 jets and growing that the program has produced. That leads me into a snapshot of cost. The data points here, the 70% cost reduction since the first jet to today's jets, is a very, very real learning point for the program. You see the 2 blue charts there, less than $80 million per copy, per jet. It's a commitment we made years ago. The F-35 program office made that commitment to our partners, our customers, in my case, our taxpayers, and we've achieved that for the first time in lot LRIP Lot 13, which is 2021 delivery year. All the while bringing those cost reductions of production down, you've seen a steep increase in the numbers of jets rolling off of our production lines. To show more precision around that growth of our production capacity, I'll note, for example, in 2018, the program delivered 91 jets. 2 years prior, in 2016, we were at 46. So we doubled our ability to produce this 5th gen capability in 2 short years. Last year delivered 134 jets. The commitment going into 2019 was 131, so we exceeded that. The 2020 commitment is 141 jets. All of that is underpinned by an F-35A, as I mentioned earlier, under $80 million. Lot 13, Lot 14. Subsequent lots, we will continue to do that. This is all based on the quantities, the economic order quantities that we're able to achieve as a large enterprise. Another nice blue skies jet at Luke Air Force Base. I don't think this is one that's here today. We represented that on the first slide, but this is getting us into the readiness and cost reduction that we have achieved for this program. Global Support Solution, GSS, you'll hear it. That we have a 3-region global support solution strategy in the program office: North America, Europe, and the Pacific. Each of those regions has, as I mentioned earlier, a production facility. Each of those regions has an engine, MRO&U, maintenance, repair, overhaul, and upgrade facility. And the component repair capabilities across the partnership and across the enterprise has been dispersed in such a way that each of the nations buying F-35s have their ability to repair, have the data access they need, the sustainment know-how to keep their fleets up and running, and that is what we commit to for all of our programs. It's a very busy chart. I won't talk about each of these, but the representation here is that we are truly global with each partner, each FMS having a bit of the work. Underpinning that, again, the same 3 regions. You see the base stand-up profile just between now and 2022, continuing to grow up to 30. In addition to the 3-year outlook, we'll have 500 plus jets in Europe by 2030, and a number of other bases. We'll have Belgium for sure. We'll have Poland. Some of these current partners and FMS customers will have additional bases. So the footprint of the F-35 enterprise continues to grow. So getting us through 2022, 2030. Beyond that, the outlook for the F-35, our lifetime horizon is in the 2070s. So this is, we're in the early days of growing this enterprise and growing the footprint of the F-35 community. So that wraps the program overview. Our next speaker is Major Jordan Levine, again from Luke Air Force Base, and he will give an overview of the capabilities that the F-35 brings to bear.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Ladies and gentlemen of the Finnish Air Force and of the press as well, thank you for having me. I am Major Jordan Levine. I go by Byrne. I'm an F-35 instructor pilot at Luke Air Force Base. Previous to that, I flew the F-22 Raptor, and I started out in the F-15C Eagle at RAF Lakenheath. I don't work for the JPO. I don't work for Lockheed. I am an operator, and I'm here to give you the facts of the capabilities at a 30,000-foot view. If I don't do that, then please ask the questions that you need to make sure that you are making the right decision for yourself. Sorry, Lockheed. All right, I'm going to let this build for a little bit. So the F-35, right, 5th gen, what does that mean? Big picture on the 5th gen fighter and what that means. It has advanced stealth, integrated weapons as well as sensors, closed loop fusion, and then a high data link to share all that data between not only the aircraft themselves, but then the supporting aircraft as well. So for the advanced stealth, we talk about a lot of different types of way to be stealthy. Some folks say that it's not as required, but I would argue differently with my close to 7 to 8 years in the 5th gen environment. We try to reduce our radar signature, our infrared signature, our RF signature, as well as our visual signature as well with tactics and other techniques. What does that do for us? It allows you to do things closer in that you might not be able to do with the previous airplane, or farther away when guys don't even know that you're there and things are happening and they don't find out until it's already over. We can all agree that we live in an environment out here in Finland that can be potentially lethal. Certain systems that we've seen in the news, the S-400, the Su-57, as Finland and the U.S. starts increasing capabilities of their aircraft and systems, we can just assume everyone else in the world is probably going to do the same thing. The only way, as of now, to battle those types of systems is with a platform that has the ability to shorten the range, potentially cut the kill chain, and then execute the missions that have already been discussed here. So how are we going to do that with the sensors? So the closed loop fusion is all based off of the integrated sensors that I already mentioned. I'll kind of go through those individually. So you see the active electronically scanned array, ESA. Previous airplanes, we talk about the radar. In briefs in the F-35, we call it the MFA, the multifunction array, because yes, it is a radar, but it's a whole lot more than that. It's a sensor in itself. So you will have the high detection and ID and track capabilities of an active radar. You also have the ability to have air-to-surface and air-to-air jamming as well, which then allows the single platform, the F-35, to start taking capabilities off of other platforms that you may already have. You see DAS, the distributed aperture system. Think of it as 6 IR cameras that you have surrounded the entire airplane. It allows you to not only detect and track threats, mainly being missile launches, whether it's an air-to-air missile launch or an air-to-surface or a surface-to-air missile launch. Then you can also use that as night vision. So previous airplanes flying at night, you have your NVGs. Now I have the ability to have a 360-degree view right in my HMD. I can even look down through the bottom of the airplane if I need to. You have EOTs. Along with the DAS, you have the TFLIR. I'll show some pictures here in a second. That is the built-in targeting pod that we have in this airplane. Primarily used for air-to-surface weapons if we're looking to ID things on the ground, as well as also laser-guided bombs. But it is also an IRST as well, and that will play into the fusion part of the sensor game plan. And then finally, RW with the emitters and geolocation. So up until 5th gen, F-22, now F-35, there's a big talk about detection, and detection is important, right? Long-range detection is important. But once I know that it's there, how do I hold on to it? How do I track it? And then how do I ID it? What is it? And more, as we're seeing civilians becoming in the mess of some of these conflicts, IDing things is going to be very important for more than just one reason. So all those sensors now will go into the closed loop fusion. I'm not going to insult your intelligence, but just to kind of simplify fusion a little bit, I like to use the example of you're walking down the street minding your own business, you hear a dog bark, your brain is now cued by your ears, you move your head, you use your eyes, and now you're able to track and ID what was just happening over there, and now I'm able to find where that dog is. Subsequently, you're walking down the street and you smell something happening. Maybe there's a bakery down the street. You don't know where the bakery is, but you turn into a bloodhound, and you can follow your nose all the way to that bakery. You can ID the eclairs or whatever you're looking to eat, and now you can update your success rate there and finish the meal that you're looking for. Everyone here in this room uses fusion every day. There's no reason not to have that in an airplane. There's a lot of ways to stay stealthy. Other competitors are doing the same thing. Our adversaries will do the same thing. And the idea is to gather as much data, tie it all together, and make that happen. Finally, for this slide at least, the data link. So we have MADL, the multi-ship advanced data link, high data transfer. So our main fighting force is going to be a 4-ship of F-35s. You can assume that each pilot in those airplanes is sharing the same picture. If one pilot doesn't have any information, automatically that information will be sent to him and everyone will be on the same page. The days of searching in your cockpit for information and then using the fusion engine up here and potentially expanding the time of decision making is now done inside the airplane faster than a human could ever do. What the pilot does now is prioritizes the information that is being presented to him and then making more lethal decisions quicker and more accurately. What this all does for the pilot of the F-35 is unprecedented SA. We know what's happening, we know who's there, where they are, and potentially what they're doing. Finally, for interoperability, inside of that Mattel data link, you're also going to see Link 16, which you're going to be able to use with previous jets if you hang on to those F-18s a little bit longer, as well as Link 16 with the other fighters that we have around the world, as well as F-35s. You also have VMF, which is a data link that will be able to help support the ground forces in close air support or strike missions. Overall, all of this turns into survivability. There's a lot of numbers up here that talk about number of years. It's 2020 here. We're talking about FOC in 10 more years. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of lives, and there's a lot of time being spent. And if we can keep the pilots alive and keep the investment on the fighter alive, then that in general is going to continue to allow the F-35 to provide the mission set that Finland needs. All right, so I'm an air-to-air dude. F-15, F-22, I knew how to shoot a lot of missiles, so I turned into a multi-role fighter, and for me, multi-role meant I can shoot missiles, I can drop a bomb, and that was about good enough for me. Multi-role is turning into a whole nother world, and you can see all of the missions up here on the slide that we can do that. So I'll primarily talk about air superiority. All of that fusion kind of mumbo-jumbo that I just talked about is a huge part of defensive counter-air, or really just protecting the airspace that Finland needs to protect. The SA is there, and then the aircraft will allow you to then get into the airspace and potentially protect the targets that you need to. SEED, suppression of enemy air defenses, or DEED, the destruction of enemy air defenses, close air support in support of the ground forces, and then strategic attack, and finally extended surface warfare, being able to kill any hostile boats that we see there, out there in the water. The one platform for all of those is what's going to make the F-35 a jet that can jump from a DCA sortie all the way to then an OCA sortie, so striking the enemy, potentially far back behind or in friendly territory, providing jamming for either the air platforms or the air-to-surface platforms, and being able to roll and jump between all of those jobs as the mission allows. Finally, one thing that is not shown on this is deterrence. As you continue to pick whatever fighter you guys use, the more and more the world is able to see the capability of this airplane. Obviously, they're not going to want to mess with this. One highlight I want to show on the picture on this slide is it is loaded out, kind of in the external loadout. That'll be in a more permissive environment. We'll go to the next slide. We'll talk about weapons and how we can maintain our stealth. All right, so we'll just talk about weapons today. We'll start with the internal loadout. So when I go out on a sortie, just strictly like DCA, trying to protect a target from fighters, I'm going to go out with a loadout of 4 AIM-120 C7s, and I'll have the internal gun. If I have now an air-to-surface mission, there's a mix of 500-pound laser-guided bombs or 2,000-pound JDAMs, as well as the 250-pound class SDB. That rack for the SDB includes 4 bombs each. You can kind of assume that if you take one missile away, you can put one bomb in there. So on an air-to-ground mission, I'm trying to stay as stealthy as possible. I'll have 2 missiles, and I'll have 2 bombs of some sort, or I can have 2 racks of the GBU-39, which means I have 8 250-pound bombs going with me. Once the environment becomes a little bit more permissive, now you can strap on the AIM-9 X Sidewinder, the IR-seeking missile. You can have 1 in each rail, so a total of 2. And then we have 2 hard points on each wing, which will then allow a 500-pound GBU 1249 or 51, basically a laser-guided bomb or GPS-guided bomb. So as Block 4 and basically the future just kind of continues, you can kind of see how the weapons now become a little bit more upgraded. A highlight for the air-to-air mission, we have Sidekick that is being developed. What that allows is the internal missile capacity to be increased from 4 to 6. So a little bit normal of the number of missiles that we see on most fighters these days. Additionally, you can see kind of the standoff weapons, particular the Joint Strike Missile coming out of Norway. I have the opportunity to fly with those Norwegian pilots back at Luke Air Force Base. A highlight for most of these smart kind of standoff weapons is not only are they long range, multi-mode seekers, so they're flying via GPS. They have IR seekers, potentially active radar as well, and they're able to automatically identify the target once they get to the target area. And then the big thing is now as we send out our little wingmen, if you will, they're also connected to the network, so the data passage between the aircraft as well as the weapon will be increased. You can see SDB-2, multi-mode seeker as well, and then the GBU-3854, just an upgraded kind of going to the 500-pound GPS or laser-guided bomb mode. The aircraft on the right does not exist in the world. That is simply just a mashup of 4th-gen fighters, just to kind of show you a little bit of a example compared to the 5th gen. So the way that I talk about 5th gen when I talk to my boys back at home is I call 5th gen the next iteration of air dominance. It's not that it's nice to have, it's a need to have, right? We've moved from 1st generation all the way up to 5th now. At some point we're going 6th generation, so you can get the contracts out ready for that. But for right now, 5th gen is where we need to be. You can see all the yeses and the nos. I'm sure some of the 4th gen dudes might argue some of those, but that's up to them. The one thing we haven't talked about yet on this slide that I like to highlight is that last one on the left column. It says significant internal fuel capacity. This jet can carry 18,000 pounds, just about 18,000 pounds of fuel internally without any sort of external tanks. With the single Pratt & Whitney motor that we have there, it has the ability to provide endurance in a fight. Flying the F-22, awesome airplane, 2 big motors and the same amount of gas. So it was always a challenge to stay on station and do the job that I needed to do. So now in this airplane, as I maybe don't even hit the tanker and I'm sitting in the airspace doing my mission, and all the other folks that are either have internal fuel because they don't want to have the RCS hit, they're going back to the tanker. How good is an airplane if it's on the tanker? It's not really all that useful, whereas I can stay on station for a lot longer, and that is a good thing. Finally, just to apply all that to the dispersed operations, sir, that you were talking about, the aircraft that we've flown, in my unit, we've had 2 individuals go down into the Middle East for combat operations, and the dispersed operations out there have been very successful. Great mission capability out there, as well as good kind of pilot, aircraft, bomb performance. As I said, I mentioned that I fly with the Norwegian pilots, and they are IOC up there in the cold north, so they're battling the ice and doing a nice job at that, as well as we've had multiple deployments to one of our Arctic bases, if you will, in Eielson Air Force Base, and we're going to shortly start standing up this squadron there, should be there in April. So the aircraft works in multiple areas, multiple environments, including combat as well. So for the F-35 modernization, I was speaking with an individual before this. There's a lot of social media, right? This is airplane. It's probably one of the more newer airplanes that's come out as social media became popular. And there's a lot of information out there. And one thing that this airplane does that nothing else has ever done yet is something called concurrency. So the airplane was put into the hands of the pilots and the operators as soon as possible with the knowledge that we're going to test this thing and we're going to operate this thing at the same time. What does that mean for the pilots? Is I've been flying this airplane for just about 2 years, and I have flown 4, almost 5 different iterations of the software, each one being an upgrade to the previous, increasing capability and making the airplane more lethal and easier to fly. I expect that to probably continue to happen. Some things that are happening right now, increased DAS. So if you remember those 6 IR cameras I was talking to, you can expect that I think in about 3 or 4 years, Raytheon is going to pick up the contract there. Decreased cost about 50% there, but with increased capability about 2 times what we're seeing right now. It's a good system, but obviously they're looking to make it better. And then auto GCAS is a little bit more of a kind of close to home survivability mode. So instead of being stealth and staying away from the bad guys, we're looking to stay away from the ground. As the airplanes get more capable and they provide more information to the pilot, the pilot is busy. They're not busy flying the airplane anymore. The motor's strong. We don't care about that thing surging or stalling. It's going to take care of us. But when I'm looking heads down on my giant touchscreen display, looking to shoot a air-to-air aircraft, maybe I'm low level and then looking to ID another air-to-ground threat, as well as maintain situational awareness on my formation, something sometimes falls out, right? An auto ground collision avoidance system is that last kind of saving grace that a pilot has. It has the elevation data of the area that you're operating in, and then you can set an altitude at which above that elevation data you want to stay above. So if I lose track of what I'm doing, or if your pilot potentially has a G-lock, G-induced loss of consciousness, and he's not able to fly the airplane anymore, it will be an automatic recovery to a safe altitude, a safe airspeed, and then that pilot and that airplane are good to go for another day. This has already been proven in F-16s and other airplanes as well, and it has saved lives as well as money. Any questions for me before I hand it over to Mr. Steve Over? Sir.
So it looks like I'm going to back clean up here, Mr. Ambassador, Colonels, Major. So you've heard a great explanation of the capability of this airplane. Major Levine talked about what is fifth generation. So I'm going to talk about the things that set us apart from the competitors. You'll hear us, we don't talk a lot about the competitors, but I want to focus on 6 things that are differentiators and make the F-35 a unique offering for Finland. So the first one is it supports customer requirements for 40 plus years. What do I mean by that? Well, you heard Colonel Buchanan talk about the fact that we're just about to deliver the 500th airplane of what's expected to be probably something approaching 4,000 total airplanes delivered. So we're very early on in this production run. When you compare and contrast us to our competitors, you'll find that most of them are not that way. You see the map over here on the right-hand side. By 2030, by the time that Finland plans to achieve initial operational capability for their airplanes, these nations will be operating F-35s in Europe and with the expectation of more than 500 airplanes permanently based here in Europe. It's the most capable, survivable fighter in the world today. It's fascinating for me. You heard the Colonel talk about fifth generation and the things that are discriminators about fifth gen, why fifth gen is an essential element in an advanced threat environment. But I'll tell you, as I travel the world and as I talk to customers for the F-35 and potential customers, I'll tell you who are the best advocates for this capability. The best advocates are the mothers of the sons and daughters that go to war. Because those mothers know when their children are flying the F-35 that there's a much higher probability that they're going to come home safe at night. Built-in and funded follow-on modernization. So this is something that's unique about the F-35. Our customers are committed. Today they will tell you that we are probably 10 to 20 years ahead of the threat systems that are out there. And they're committed to continuing to maintain that technological edge over those adversaries as they continue to mature. And it's a feature that's very unique with the F-35. Customers are investing, whether Finland buys the F-35 or not, whether they select the airplane or not, our other customers are going to continue to advance the capability of this airplane for decades to come, for that 30 to 40 year additional production run of airplanes. Economies of scale for affordability. You heard Colonel Buchanan talk about how we've been on a militant journey to drive cost out of this weapon system to reduce the acquisition price to less than $80 million US per airplane. We're on that same militant journey right now, driving cost out of what it takes to sustain the F-35 today, and that will continue for decades to come. So in Finland, we understand it's an incredibly important requirement to achieve security of supply and industrial participation to allow Finnish industry to be a vital support, play a vital support role for the Finnish Air Force. And Lockheed Martin and the offering that we're putting forward with the F-35 is committed to both of those elements. We're achieving security of supply with technology transfer and know-how that will allow the Finnish Air Force in very austere circumstances to be able to maintain and support the airplane for their operational needs. And lastly, there's significant unique opportunities to cooperate with the U.S. and regional operators, specifically around the F-35. The United States Air Force has started a users group in Asia Pacific as well as in Europe, where periodically, several times a year, they gather all the operators together, where they're sharing lessons learned about the unique capabilities of this airplane. So as fighter pilots learn how to leverage the capability of this fifth generation airplane in ways that they've never been able to apply fourth generation, they're getting together and sharing that knowledge and know-how, tactics, techniques, and procedures, so that everyone is becoming better from the lessons that are being learned out there. And with that, we're very pleased to be here in Finland today for HX Challenge, and I guess the two of you will stand up with me and we'll be able to field any questions that you have of the three of us. Please, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for your presentations. Very, I'd say, inspiring, probably. But we also read free media on the challenges your plane has and has had from the very beginning. And one of the constraints for Finnish Air Force is beyond acquisition, we need to be able to operate them within the current cost of operating Hornets. And what I can read from U.S. publications, currently cost of operating this aircraft is anything from $30,000 to $45,000 per hour. That's my first concern. The second, which is kind of surprising, is operational readiness. And alarming thing is that they say that it's lack of parts. And I'd like to have your comments on these two items.
Well, so Colonel Buchanan, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll take
that.
Yeah. Regarding your first question, thank you for that. The cost per flying hour is kind of the metric we use for operating an F-35 over its life. That's comprised of a number of variables. Today I showed you kind of our driving cost out of the production and our commitment to drive cost out of the sustainment. We have a goal within the enterprise, both U.S. DoD and all customers, to get to 25 by 25,000 U.S. dollars per flight hour by the year 2025, and we have specific steps along the way to achieve that metric and that goal. And our militant press for affordability and cost savings will get us there. That was the first question. Your second question was about
Operational readiness.
Again, we have today, through a few deployments, U.S. Air Force, U.S. Marine Corps, and a couple of our partners experience, the operational units have enjoyed through deployments in the 80 to 90% availability range. The fleet across the board is in the 70% range, and 80% being a enterprise goal for all jets. Now, Major Levine talked about the ages of different jets, and as new jets come on board, those rates for our newer jets, I'll call them, are much higher than the rates for those older initial jets that came off the line. So certainly, as an example for Finland, you would be getting jets well past the ones that we're flying today, and I have every confidence that we'll meet those sustainment goals in those years. Anything, Mr. Over?
Well, so I would add one last little thing there. So it's well acknowledged by our customers that both the quantities of spares that have been purchased and the rate at which those spares have been purchased have lagged where we need to be. And right now, you're seeing some big transitions. And one of the things that Colonel Buchanan alluded to, later production lots of airplanes becoming more sustainable, is because that lag is being minimized, and we're fielding spare parts as the airplanes are being put into the production quantities. So the parts are there when the airplanes are fielded as opposed to lagging, as well as depot repair capability, so that when the parts break, there's somebody other than the original equipment manufacturer to be able to maintain that part. And so all of those are things that are helping improve availability of the airplanes and drive costs out of operating the aircraft. Please.
So I think that out of all HX contenders, your plane is the most computer-driven or computer-based one. So its capabilities and performance are mostly defined by the software. And you use the term block to describe what version of software and hardware capabilities you have put together in the plane. So you are now building initial version of the Block 4. In 2025, 2030s, would that be Block 4.5, Block 5, or what block? And who and how would it be different from today's plane?
So, thank you for that question as well. Major Levine mentioned in his 2 years of flying F-35s, he's flown a number of different configurations, which is due to the software upgrades, improving the jet over time. We work within Block 4. You'll also hear follow-on modernization. That is our process to continuously develop and deliver capability to all the customers flying the jet. So for follow-on modernization, whatever block nomenclature you give it, by 2025 we'll have Block 4, the defined capabilities, and then it'll be a constant and iterative process to look out at the threats, look at what capability is needed, and make those investments to deliver that capability.
For journalists, please introduce yourself as part of the question.
You guys can chime in if you have something on that.
So to kind of follow up on that question, right? We're not sure what they're going to call it. It may be Block 5, it may be Block 4.5. What's the most important takeaway I would submit for your audience is that this follow-on modernization program is funded through 2025, and every expectation that it's going to continue so that this cutting-edge, state-of-the-art technology will stay ahead of the threat as the threat naturally continues to advance.
Yes, sir.
Is there, I'm trying to make this understandable for a layman. Is there a sort of time that you can give for the turnaround of the plane when it comes in from a mission before starting off to another? How long does it take to maintain the plane on the ground before it can take off again?
Can you take that one?
Yeah, typically we plan on 3 hours from landing to takeoff.
3 hours.
About 3 hours. It can be done much faster, and that's obviously in a training environment, non-combat, Luke Air Force Base. So that'll all be done probably based on of regulations that the Finnish Air Force decides of what needs to be done on the through flight, is what they'll call it. I mean, if it's just gas, then obviously that's going to be a lot lower. But we plan on 3 hours from from landing to takeoff.
Good.
Well, in hostile, wartime-like conditions, our customers are practicing what they call hot pit refueling and rearming, where the pilot never leaves the cockpit, the engine continues to run, and the maintenance crews will refuel the airplane and rearm the airplane while he's still sitting in the cockpit. You can turn that airplane very quickly.
Another question, if I may. On the map, there's a Norway and Denmark and Poland. If Finland were to purchase this place, would they be able to connect with those other places in other air forces in Denmark and Norway to make a chain against hostile?
Well, that's a great question, and thank you for asking it. Can I lead off and then turn to you?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that will happen, right? So this Colonel Levine or Major Levine talked about this unique F-35 purpose-built data link that we call MADL. Right? It allows F-35s at a very high data rate without compromising their stealth to share vast amounts of information. And the F-35 is the only airplane that has this data link today. Now, will it be proliferated into other assets? It's possible to do that. But today it exists only on the F-35. And so you have the assured connectivity and communication ability to do that with F-35s that are operating here. So yes, Norwegian, Danish, Dutch F-35s could share this seamless information picture with potential Finnish F-35s and vice versa. And by the way, that's the things that are being worked out in this European users group is how do we do that? What are the standards? How do we share crypto keys and those kinds of details that allow that kind of seamless communication to happen?
I can expound on that a little bit. So Link 16, familiar with that, that's very proliferated. That is just an infrastructure of a data link that is tied into other aircraft, via different crypto, right? Different agreements between countries. What are we going to share with each other, and all of that exists and already is happening. So the Finnish F-35s would be able to now work with potential whatever fourth gen is left in Europe. Currently at Luke Air Force Base, we have American, Dutch, Italian, Norwegian. I think those are types of aircraft that we have. We can fly any jet, any day. They can all talk to each other via MATL, the high data rate. I'll fly a Norwegian airplane one day, I'll fly an American airplane one day. The process is the same, and as we talked about, it's a computer, right? So I can program this computer to do something. I can also do it over here in this airplane, and you can change that if you want to.
Well, just for a frame of reference to your first question on the turn, how long does it take to turn? The event here, just so everyone knows, it's planned for a 2.5 hour turn time, which is slightly less than what they would use in a typical training scenario. Again, no weapons being loaded, but 2.5 hours for a frame of reference. And that's primarily driven by the short but beautiful Finnish winter daytime, trying to keep it during the day.
Yes, sir. Jouko Junala from the newspaper Ilta-Sanomat here in Helsinki. Every time an F-35 takes off, it gathers huge amounts of data in terms of its environment and threats and radio frequency environment and so forth and so forth. Will that data be Finland's data in the future if we purchase this plane? Or do we have to share it with America?
We have our data collection tool today is called Alice. We will transition to a system called Odin in the near future. That is the information system behind the air system, and embedded in there is what we call sovereign data gateway or sovereign data management, which means the very idea that you suggested. Sovereign data to the Finnish Air Force remains in Finland. Finnish property does not get transmitted through network means back to the remainder of the enterprise. In short, yes, you keep your sovereign data.
Yes, I have a follow-up question to the previous question about sharing the picture between jets from other countries. Those all other countries are NATO countries and Finland is not, so you said that it is possible, but I presume that would need a political decision from NATO and from Finland as well to decide to do that, because I mean it can't be done by the pilot in the plane that, hey, I want to see what my Polish colleagues are seeing. And then one other question about the maintenance during wartime. What can you tell us about the plans for that? Because Finland will not be able to fly the planes to Italy during wartime conditions for some bigger updates and to get the planes repaired. So how would you do that here in Finland or closer to Finland?
I'll touch on both.
Okay.
Regarding interoperability with NATO, non-NATO, the F-35 air system has the capability to be interoperable with those other nations, regardless of their political status. So from our standpoint, the F-35 competition team, certainly the capability is there. The politics behind enabling that, turning that on, is a much different matter. But certainly the the offer that this team will present back to the Finnish Air Force is an easy yes, as we heard earlier. Regarding security of supply, we are well aware from the presentation earlier and from many conversations within our governments of the key nature of security of supply during wartime or hostile events, and the offer again that our F-35 team puts on the table back to the Finnish Air Force is well equipped to meet that security of supply arrangement under your doctrine.
Could you please give us some details about
I think the details behind it are best left to our conversations with the Finnish Air Force. But again, as I mentioned earlier, I have every confidence that the sustainment capacity is there to meet your needs.
If I can add on, so we have now been since 2004 have to be interoperable with NATO units here in North Europe. So Link 16, now we are able to share our picture also. But of course that's dependent on political decisions. We have different networks with the Link 16 and how it's used. It's both political and military strategic decisions.
If I could also add, so I talked a little bit about MADL and this remarkable capability to transfer data. As Major Levine mentioned, the F-35 also has Link 16. So other allies or associates of Finland that you want to be able to share and be interoperable with, you would do that through a Link 16 data link using the F-35. Right, so just because you may be collaborating with another nation that doesn't operate an F-35 doesn't mean that the F-35 isn't interoperable with it.
Yes, sir.
I'm Timo Keränen from the Finnish Broadcasting Company, and if I understand correctly, to be able to sustain or maintain the plane, the Finns would have to get all the information in the plane in the computer programs. Would you open all that data to the Finns?
I will say that the offer, the data access and the know-how, the knowledge necessary to assure your security of supply is accounted for in the offering we're putting back to the Finnish government and the Finnish Air Force.
And then I have a follow-up question to the ambassador. As it was mentioned here, this is clearly a NATO plane. Do you think that there will be some political opposition in Finland against F-35?
Well, thank you for that question. Sorry to borrow your line. Two things. I think the second question I was asked by a newspaper reporter when I got to Finland was, what's your position on Finland joining NATO? Which is in a way inherent in your question. And my answer then, as it is now, is still the same. The United States is not in the business of telling Finland what to do. I will not speak for the military here, nor for the manufacturer. But my impression is that this is not a NATO plane. This is an American-made plane that's made for America and our friends and allies, some of whom are in the European Union and many of whom are in NATO. So I think there's no NATO equation in the aspects of making or not making a decision based on this plane. So I believe I understand that part of the question, but I think that there are the more salient parts of it are non-NATO related, and I'm
Very well
best
said.
I can do on the spot, Joe.
Very well said. Very well said.
Niels Möke from the Finnish news agency. How has Turkey's leaving the program affected production, and has the production from Turkey been shifted to other countries?
I'll take that. Thank you for that question. Primarily, we are focused on the HX challenge and the jets that are here to meet the needs of this flight evaluation. But briefly, the U.S. government and the process of removing Turkey from the partnership is certainly certainly requires some additional work for us. Turkey, as a supplier both to spares and production parts, has backups. Any good program is going to have alternate sources, we would call it, where the source is made at one supply house. If something goes bad there, we're going to have an alternate source for those, and that is exactly what we're exercising. So our production numbers that we show fully account for, and we haven't slipped off of our commitment to produce the jets for any of our partners or customers.
Was Turkey included in those 13 countries?
It was not.
Singapore was.
Singapore was not either. Singapore is not an FMS customer.
We have time for two more questions.
Repeat, yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, sorry. My name is Tapani Koivunen. I'm here as a citizen of Finland, also a taxpayer, and also I'm a volunteer in national defense. That's my background. I also lived 20 years in the U.S. Now, I'd like to address a technical issue that I'm sure you are familiar. Our thinking in Finland right now is that in a crisis situation, we would need to leave our fixed bases and operate from road network bases that change rapidly, if you may, and also operate on runways way below NATO standard 2,000-meter runways. How do you see your aircraft fits into operations like that?
Do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, sure. The takeoff and landing performance of this airplane is very similar to the Hornet. And just like the Hornet, I've seen the videos, I've talked to some of the pilots that have executed that mission. No matter what airplane you're flying, you're going to need some level of straight road that allows us to have clearance after you take off.
And how much is that?
It's all going to be based on fuel weight, on weapons weight, on the time of year, on the time of day.
Fully loaded winter day.
Summer.
I don't have an answer off the top of my head. I mean, we have told data, so takeoff and landing data. The engine right now is producing 43,000 pounds of thrust if you're in max reheat, we call that here, max afterburner. So if you think about, you have about a 30,000 pound airplane. If you want to put 18,000 pounds of gas and 18,000 pounds of weapons on it, you're exceeding the 43, but you're not that far off. You're still probably somewhere in like the 0.8 thrust to weight ratio. So as far as being able to take off, the capability is there. Winter is a good thing for taking off, right? Because it's colder, more dense, more oxygen, so the performance will be there. Potentially landing is going to be more of the limiting factor based on the icy roads and how good you can get the roads clear. However, the brakes on this airplane, I'm not sure how they compare to the F-18, but talking to my colleagues who flew the F-16, they're monsters. You basically, just like in your car now, you get on the brakes, you put your feet down as hard as you can, and the jet uses its anti-skid to keep you straight and slowing down as fast as possible. So I think the performance is there. As far as specifics, I can't go any further.
So how about maintenance at the roadside basis? Changing the engine or doing some major repair?
Well, that's actually really a strength of the F-35, right? The airplane was designed around the general notion that you don't have a lot of back shops. You don't have intermediate level support. So you can change an engine in that austere environment. You can actually do maintenance on the engine in that austere environment and even separate modules of the engine in there. So I would expect this to have, by the way, from a performance standpoint, about similar characteristics of the F-18s that the Finnish Air Force operates today. Yeah, go ahead. Steve Sheehy, my colleague here.
Yeah. I will tell you, the F-35 is built for dispersed operations. First of all, Steve talked about the engine. 95% of the engine components can be taken off the engine without the engine coming out of the aircraft. That's a huge advantage. I have over 25, 26 years of aircraft maintenance experience. It's a huge advantage. You get those components off without pulling the engine out. The other thing on the F-35, we have a thing called the Integrated Power Package, the IPP. That allows you to fire up the aircraft as if the engine was running. All the systems in the aircraft are operating without running the engine. What's that allow you to do? You can do all flight control tests, do any maintenance you need on that aircraft, ops check it or operationally check it out, make sure it's working fully, even transfer fuel on the aircraft if required. without a fuel truck or starting the engine. You have a complete containerized aircraft that way. And the aircraft is built for that. So dispersed operations, this aircraft is rock solid. On top of that, 95% of the parts you take off this aircraft we call first tier removable. That is, you open a panel, go in the weapons bay, go in the nose wheel well, and you pull out a component and put it back in. Very, very simple, unlike fourth generation aircraft. So it is made for dispersed operations. It was engineered into the aircraft.
Sorry, last question from you, please.
Yes, Maria Jesper from the Daily Huvudstadsbladet. One last question. And there are only single seaters of this jet, which means that there will be no Finnish guy in the back seat checking what you are doing during the evaluation. How can we be sure that you are not going to fool you? And that
Play
the
video
results
games.
will be accurate.
Sidebar on it.
What was the last part? Sorry.
Just how can we be sure that
What we're doing here, you mean?
the results of the evaluation, as there will be no Finnish guy sitting in the back checking what you are doing during this evaluation week?
Yeah, I think we have how many pilots briefed in? 12. There's 12 Finnish pilots that are, if you will, briefed in to the F-35 program. They will be able to review the tapes and see what was happening. So you won't have to take our word for it. You'll see the facts. They will see the facts, and you have to take their word for it.
Yeah, as already been mentioned, so nowadays everything is recorded. So afterwards we get all the data, we have access to and see and monitor the data. Not a problem either with the creep and so on. It was also single seaters.